So now that one person has broken through the glass ceiling, and you know who you are, and so does everybody else, that simply means that it's possible for anyone and everyone. And it's very visible to me what one of the barriers is for literally everyone else. No one isn't revolving in this issue. Everyone else, everyone who is standing in the shattered glass and trying to figure out how to get through the opening, now that there's no ceiling, continues to be involved with a very simple, very basic societal idea. It doesn't have to do with ordinary conditioning. It has to do with the trend of the moment. Because conditionings, like everything else, are in fashion and out of fashion. They hang around for a while, everybody climbs on board, and then after a while, whether it's a year, whether it's 3 years, whether it's 10 years, it dwindles, and some new wacky idea takes its place, and everybody signs on for that. It is such a barrier to spiritual life and spiritual advancement that it's hard to talk about because it's so simple and so silly and so wrong that you can't easily grasp the seriousness of it, the degree to which it prevents a whole range of possibilities. It's the fear of making a mistake. This is rampant, really, and no one else in the United States is talking about this. You will only hear it from me. I have not heard it anywhere. I've not even heard it obliquely referred to. Where have you heard people talking about, or anyone saying there's an epidemic going on in the society, and the nature of the epidemic is a simple fear, non-willingness to make a mistake? This wasn't going on 20 years ago. It wasn't even going on 10 years ago. There have always been people in the last 500 years. There have always been people who carry a kind of a hesitation to act because they may look foolish, because they may make a mistake, because what they do may turn out to be really, really the wrong decision. Therefore, they twist and never make a decision. That used to be a person here and there. 1 out of 20, 1 out of 50, 1 out of 100, 1 out of 1,000, I don't know. But it wasn't many. It was 1 out of something. It wasn't 1 out of 10. Now it's everybody. That's what an epidemic is. When an illness becomes common. And this is an illness. The problem with this illness is it's a spiritual illness. It's a psychological condition that rises to the level of spiritual illness because it prevents so much. It keeps you absolutely glued to the mental level, as if you're in cement boots and can't move anywhere else. It is far more significant than it sounds. Fear of making a mistake. Doesn't sound like a big deal when you simply name it. But I'm simply wanting to point out to you that it's a very big deal. It hampers you in life and holds you back, and it hampers you in spiritual life and holds you back, and it's the second one that matters. It's the second one that will have true and significant effects. The first one, that fear operating in your worldly life, so-called, is not going to affect anything other than how your life operates. But I'm not really concerned with how your life operates. I'm concerned with how your spirit operates. And on that level, this is a really, really important issue. So, a requirement of a spiritual seeker, a requirement of a disciple, a requirement of trying to move for real toward truth, trying to go for real on the road to God, trying to actually be more in reality, trying to find out what reality really is. A requirement of that process or any of those processes is that you be willing to be a fool, is that you have no ego attachment to looking foolish. You have no ego attachment to being seen stark naked with all your birthmarks and flaws and cellulite and extra necks and extra stomachs and extra flab and extra everything. That you be willing to be utterly naked when everybody else in the room has on 8 layers of clothes. Because you came into this world naked, and to go to God, you have to go naked. You have to go as you came. You have to be attired correctly. And the only correct attire for the road to God is no attire, no false front, no attempt to hide, no embarrassment to be the flawed human being that every human being is. Show me a human being without flaws. There's never been one. You can name the greats of all time, the best among us who've ever lived, the Jesuses, the Buddhas, all of them. It's easy to identify their personality flaws, their humanity visible. That's all it is. Your flaws are just your humanity made visible, and you can't hide it. It isn't possible to make your flaws invisible. The problem is you see them as flaws. Flaws is the right word, but the wrong connotation. You have to take the word flaws in the right way, which is you aren't mistake-free and misperception-free in every way. That's what flaw means. It doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It doesn't mean you have a dire condition. It simply means you can't meet the standard of I'm an ideal human being. It doesn't exist. Human being means the ideal isn't possible because there's so much potential. There's so many levels. There's such a degree of richness that there's no way every surface can be shiny. Every piece can be clean and bright. There's no way. It's not the definition of human being. It's the definition of God or demigod. If we think of many gods in the worldly sense, it's having the idea that you're supposed to be a god. You're supposed to be a deva, a demigod, and be operating at such a level that the idea of flaws is just not possible. That everything in you is operating optimally. And there's so much going on that that's not literally by definition possible. A human being is a compendium, is a whole bag of more things on more levels happening than is calculable. It can't even be described. The reality of it is such that it literally can't even be described, let alone perfected, let alone made into some high ideal where everything is at optimum level and everything operates as smoothly and perfectly as one would ideally want. The ideal is not a problem unless you think that you should be at the ideal, because ideal means it can't be done. It lives on the ideal level and can't be manifested in the actuality of everything going on. And the simplest formation of that issue is fear of making a mistake. And fear of making a mistake is not fear of going in the wrong direction. It's fear of looking stupid, looking like a fool. And if you live your life from the basis of the most important, or one of the most important things, is to try to never look like a fool, your focus becomes so picayune, so concerned with the smallest possibilities, that you have limited your vast and grand and glorious potential down to a degraded level. Then you're not really even operating as a true human being. You're operating as a cowering creature. You're not recognizing that making a mistake is impossible to avoid, is absolutely normal, is spiritually correct, and the fear of making a mistake, the resulting unwillingness to take even tiny risks, simply limits you in ways that are just too silly. It's a silly fear. It's a mind-generated, culturally supported, right now, false notion that it matters. It doesn't matter. What does it matter if you make a mistake? What does it matter if you make a huge mistake? Life will go on. If it's a huge mistake that has consequences that need to be dealt with, you'll deal with them. If the mistake needs to be corrected, if you're intelligent, and everyone has sufficient intelligence, for this, nobody's lacking. If a mistake happens and it needs to be corrected, you'll correct it. If you feel embarrassed, you'll feel embarrassed. If you feel ashamed, you'll feel ashamed. If you feel like a fool, you'll feel like a fool. So frickin' what? So, a significantly required quality for a spiritual seeker, for a disciple, for anyone interested in truth. Even not truth, anyone interested in living rightly. A required attitude is that you be perfectly fine with being a fool. Because if you're a human being, fool is included, genius is included, shining heart is included, wonderful qualities are included, and acting the fool is included. Making mistakes is included. Not having all the answers is the only position you can ever be in. You're born in it, you'll die in it, and you'll always be in it. Unless you created all this, why would you try to act as if you can claim that you did? Because that's the only way to rise above the possibility of being a fool. Otherwise, it's inevitable. So if you're willing to be seen as a fool, if you're willing to feel like a fool, if you're willing to bear any embarrassment or awkwardness that creates in you, that's the requirement. It doesn't mean you'll feel like a fool and that will feel just fine. You'll feel embarrassed. You'll feel like a jerk. Whatever the feeling that goes with it, you'll have it. But it's not hard, actually, to get to the point where that's not disturbing to you, where feeling like a fool simply means you're also able to laugh at yourself. The whole world can be laughing at you. The best response is laugh with them. Because if you're cowering, you can't go to God. If you're cowering, you can't move toward truth. And the most basic, simple way that everyone is cowering, only one has stopped it, which means anyone can. The basic way everyone is living this, I don't want to make a mistake attitude, has got to be dropped. It's got to be seen as the nonsense and limitation that it is. There is, of course, in every human being a strong impulse to not be embarrassed, to not feel like you've messed up. But that shouldn't be followed. That's just a wired-in impulse. Nobody likes feeling like a fool. So I'm not saying be willing to feel like a fool and like it. That would be wildly unrealistic. You won't like it. But there'll come a point, if you do drop this attitude, if you do transcend it for real, there'll come a point where you absolutely will not mind it. You will not mind the momentary embarrassment. You won't be upset at the unpleasantness of it. You'll simply say, fool again. Which is the same as saying, aha, oh yeah, I remember, I'm a human being. I don't have a map for every situation that I find myself in. I don't have a owner's manual for every possibility. I'm flying blind and I'm doing the best I can. And that situation guarantees mistakes, guarantees feeling foolish, guarantees being embarrassed. The only question is, are you willing to be stark naked? Are you willing to not care what anybody thinks? What's the fear of making a mistake? What's the fear of being seen a fool? It's the fear of other people's opinion, other people's view of you. You can't afford that luxury. You cannot afford, on the road to God, you cannot afford to give one flying fuck what anybody else thinks. Anybody. You can only be using your true homing device if and when you get to the point that the only opinion that matters is what God thinks of you. If you're concerned with what other people think of you, you cannot be actually concerned with what God thinks of you. If you're concerned with what your immediate supervisor thinks of you, you cannot be concerned with what the company CEO thinks of you. Your focus is too narrow. Your level of concern is too low. So one way to deal with this is you transfer your concern. You transfer your concern for what do people think of me into what does God think of me, and forget about all those people. And it's easy to see without even thinking about it for more than 5 seconds that if you're being a fool, if you're making a mistake, God's opinion of you is not going to be drastically affected. In fact, it won't be affected at all. His opinion will be based on how willing are you to be naked. If you're doing this, his opinion goes down. If you're doing this, and it isn't a pretty picture, and it never is, his opinion shoots up because his opinion is based on your willingness to be who and what you are. When you're afraid of making a mistake, you're saying, I'm not really okay with this idea that I should be accepting of my humanity. And when you're not accepting of your humanity, what do you think God's opinion of that is going to be? Remember, He's the one who made you human. You're saying, Mr. God, Miss God, Mrs. God, whatever it is, you fucked up. You made a mistake. Look, you made me this human thing, and you know what? I'm not really a fan. This isn't working real well because look, I'm embarrassed, I'm ashamed, I'm messing up. And if you were to have that conversation with the big boss, his response would be, listen to what you're saying, it's idiotic. If I made you a human being with everything that that includes and means, why are you complaining to me that it should be different? Why are you saying that that's not good enough for you? Why are you saying that somehow I've come up with a flawed design? Do you really think I do lousy designs? Do you really think I have production accidents? Do you really think that everything isn't market tested to the nth degree? Do you think you were rolled out as a product before its time? I developed you correctly, so your complaint is inappropriate, not respectful. So there's a lot involved, a lot implied, a lot contained in this little fear of making a mistake. It's a little fear. It's not like you're living your life based on it. But it's like having a thorn in the soft spot of the sole of your foot. It's the tiniest thing. It's not going to kill you. But man, you can really feel it, and it really impairs you. When every step you take, it hurts, and you're all sensitive, and you feel like the pain is shooting up through your whole body, even though it's this tiny little pinpoint thing. That's how it operates, this fear of making a mistake. It's a tiny, tiny sliver that affects every moment, everything you do. Every action you take, every moment of experiencing, you're aware of this sliver. Not consciously aware in the sense of it's going on and you see it, but in how it radiates in you and causes you to start and not move freely. Because you're trying to not step on it more than you have to, because it hurts. But this is a made-up hurt. There's no real sliver. It's really the situation of you are imagining you have a sliver. Because this is a bogus fear. There are real fears in life. This isn't one of them. The fear of making a mistake is a mental attitude, a psychological, emotional position. Some of it is conditioned. Some of you had parents or friends or influences that support this idea, but the brunt of it is it's culturally popular at the moment in Western culture, and from what I can tell, most of all in the US. I've been recently enough in Europe that I don't see it as prevalent. I've talked to enough Canadians and other people from Western culture regularly enough to have a sense that America is the only place where it's an epidemic, where it rises to the level of epidemic, meaning almost everyone has this condition and has it to a high degree. Not just a low fever, a high fever. The symptoms are more significant than the illness. It's not a big sickness, but the symptoms are quite affecting you. So let me reiterate it and emphasize it. It's required if you want truth, if you want God, if you want reality. It's required to be willing and able to walk naked in front of the whole world. It'll never be required that you do it in front of the whole world, but that attitude is the required attitude. That you be willing to stand up and show yourself. The good, what you believe is the good parts, and the bad parts both. You can't be visible without everything being seen. And the truth is, as I've said, literally from day one of public speaking, from the first day, was the title of our first public event 10.5 years ago. You can't hide anything. Everyone sees it all the time. They may not be conscious of it. They may not have an ability to articulate it, but it registers. Everyone has so much intelligence as a human being that they see everything in you every time you walk in the room. They just aren't probably aware of it. But it registers in the human psyche. It's like everybody is Superman with X-ray vision. So what are you worried about being seen naked? Superman sees you naked every time you walk in the room. And that's everybody. Superman is everybody. Everybody has X-ray vision. Everybody sees you in your totality because that's what you're transmitting all the time. You have no ability to transmit other than all of you. Everything in this universe is structured that way, has that element going on, that everything is always transmitting its whole self, showing its whole self, showing up with its whole self. You can't show up with part of you. You can only fool yourself into thinking you're managing image, you're showing something and hiding the rest. That's your delusion. Only all of you can walk into the room. Only all of you can open your mouth. Every time you say anything, it's holographic. You're saying everything about yourself every time you say anything. Every glance shows everything in you and about you. It just isn't understood in normal, everyday ideas that that's going on. The idea is you can manage your image, you can hide things, you can bring out the best in you and kind of hold back the worst in you so people won't see it, or your fears, or your flaws, or your dilemmas, whatever it is. But that's your false notion. Everybody knows everything. Unconsciously and in the universal mind, everyone knows everything. Every time you say hello, your whole self is transmitted in that hello. What you consider good, what you consider bad, what you're ashamed of, what you're afraid of, it's all there. Because you're always all there. There are no partial yous, there's just you. There are no separable parts that can be pulled out. All of you was born, all of you will die, all of you lives every moment. Not some of you and the rest that you're hoping is being sufficiently held back or hidden or not viewable. The fear of making a mistake obviously has in it the fear of being seen. The unwillingness to admit that you might not be exactly everything you always hope to be. There's nothing wrong with that hoping, but it's foolish to think it's achievable. It's foolish to think it's manageable so that others will see only what you want them to see in you. This is why in some actual spiritual, traditional ways, really long established religions, the main practice is nudity. The main practice is you never wear clothes. There's a religion that people haven't much heard of in the United States in the West, but is well known in the East, called Jainism, Jaina. Osho was born into a Jaina family. And Jain monks, the Jain Orthodox, those who are religious and want to live the religious life, live naked. They don't wear clothes. It's part of their practice to never wear clothes. And that's the idea, to hide nothing, because you can't hide anything from God. And what does it matter hiding something from other people? What do you gain by doing that, even if you were successful at it, which you can't be, but let's say for the sake of argument you could be. What do you gain? Nothing. So they don't live it as a nudism, they live it as a day-to-day, moment-to-moment reminder that you cannot hide yourself. That practice in Jainism is actually simply the same as having a photo of your guru, as a reminder of your spiritual intention. So they go naked, they renounce clothing for the rest of their lives as a practical reminder that naked I was born, naked I will die, and naked I go to God. It reminds them that they're on the way to God. But every spiritual seeker, every disciple has to be a Jain, has to adopt the practice of total nudity. Nothing to do with wearing clothes or not wearing clothes. Psychic nudity, the nudity of the psyche, being willing to be exposed and seen, not trying to hide anything, which is a futile attempt and wastes your energy, makes you feel small needlessly, makes you feel like you have something to guard, and there is nothing to guard. You are as you are. What sense does it make to guard the visibility of everything you are, which by definition and by its very nature is always visible? Now, you want to talk about being a fool? That's the real foolishness. So I haven't stressed this. I've mentioned it along the way, all through, from the first day till today. But today, for the first time, I'm stressing it in a big way. Because everyone is, to one degree or another, involved with this false concern, needless concern. And now one person has been able to get beyond it, which means the way is paved. It'll be much easier for the rest of you now to get to that position, get to that attitude. But of course you won't do it if you're not told that that's where you need to get to. That's a required threshold, a meaningful and necessary step. So that when you come to Satsang or any ICODA event, you're willing to, when you speak to me or even speak to your co-disciples or co-friends, you're willing to not waste time managing your image. You're willing to just speak what's going on in a naked way. That will also have a big effect. You'll get much further because so far you've been practicing limited communication with me. You've been trying to manage your image with me, which is even more foolish because you can't hide from me. You can't hide from anybody, but most people will not be conscious of what they're seeing in you. I know what I'm looking at. It's not being registered unconsciously, it's being registered consciously. So to in any way try to hide from me, it's just a waste of energy. And you're telling me when you do that you're not ready for me to give you everything I can. The result is I give you what you're willing to take, which is far less than I would like to give you. So nakedness is the human natural way. Cultures that live naked are much closer to God automatically. It's a cultural condition. The whole culture is more God-oriented for that reason. You're living in a prudish culture where nakedness assumes sexuality, assumes sensuality, assumes some kind of aspect that has nothing to do with simply being yourself naturally and not being ashamed of your actuality, not being embarrassed about any aspect of you. And the proof of the non-dangerousness of it, the benignness of it, is easy. Just think, what is your attitude when somebody else inadvertently acts foolish? Do you have a big judgment on them? If you see that it wasn't their intention, there's no bad intention in it, they simply made a mistake, they simply didn't know. Think of yourself. What happens? You almost immediately are compassionate. You almost immediately, if it's an affront to you even, you almost immediately forgive it. You go there, no big deal. But you don't apply that to yourself. It doesn't occur to you that if that's your attitude, then when you're a fool, what do you think other people are going to be doing in response? They're going to have the exact same feeling. It kind of makes you more lovable. It's kind of endearing. Yet your approach is, I'll be judged and I'll be, in a sense, condemned if I look the fool, if I make a mistake. So there's a simple way to remember it. God only opens the door to people who are willing to be fools. You have to go as your best self, and your inner fool is included. The unwillingness to be naked is not your best self. That's your fear-based self. That's your ignorantly believing you can hide something self. Your best self doesn't mean your more perfected aspect. It means you as you are. And you as you are obviously includes making mistakes, obviously includes moments in life of feeling like a fool. You cannot live a human life and not feel like a fool often. I've said to you before, recently, and emphasized it, and this is the right place to insert it again, is you have not lived one day without making a mistake. You are making mistakes all day long. You just aren't aware of them. And most of them you'll never become aware of. Some of them, in hindsight, a year from now, a day from now, a month from now, you'll look back, oh, that was a mistake. So factor that in, that it is not possible to get through a day without making mistakes. In fact, it's harder for you to believe, so I don't need you to accept this, but I can tell it to you simply as factually so, and I know it to be so. You can't get through an hour without making mistakes. And I'm not going to tell you how many you make in an hour. Because you have idiotic thoughts, you have nonsense emotions, you have ridiculous conceptions of things, you have weird attitudes. All of these when you experience them in operation, you feel are mistakes. When you're aware of them, when you are living them, they feel to you like mistakes. Most of the time, they're unconsciously going on and you're not paying attention and your awareness isn't broad enough yet. So it's out of your consciousness. It's not in your conscious awareness. But the bits that bubble up into your conscious awareness, you experienced as, oh, I made a mistake. Give it up. And be happily, optimistically, cheerfully, willingly ready to be experiencing yourself as a fool at any moment. Only fools get to God. Only very intelligent fools get to God. Only very, very happily naked people get to God. Only people who are willing to say, hey, look at my big fat butt, get to God. Only people who can say, how do you like my disgusting birthmark? See the big thick hairs growing out of it? Disgusting. All the splotchiness. It's 19 colors I counted in it. 4 different shades of purple and some weird piss yellow. Have you ever seen anything uglier? Kind of makes you vomit, don't it? Only people with that attitude get to God. Only people who have adopted the approach of I don't need to spend one atom, one molecule of my life energy trying to hide something, get to God. Only the people who understand it all the way that I have nothing to lose, absolutely nothing to fear about other people's opinion. I have nothing to lose in regard to what their opinion is of me. Whether it's the highest, whether it's the lowest, doesn't change anything in my life. But God's opinion of me will determine whether I get to God or not, whether truth becomes my position or not. Now, you need to hear this part literally the way I mean it, which is literal. Only God's opinion of you, literally God's opinion of you, will determine your spiritual success. And God's opinion, I'll repeat, is based not on how perfect are you, but how willing are you to accept your humanity in all its aspects. Because if God's opinion of you is high or improves, more grace comes your way. If God's opinion of you is still trying to hide, don't wait for grace. It ain't coming. Grace is waiting for you to show yourself fully, for you to be less concerned with opinion, your own and others. Grace is ready to flood over you when it sees that you're really primarily or only concerned with God's opinion of you. Because grace isn't measured, it's elicited. You get it to the degree that you're attracting it. It flows from God, and it flows based on His opinion So if you want to ask anybody, how am I doing? The only one to ask is God. Anybody else's opinion of how you're doing will not have any grace effect, but God's opinion of how you're doing will have a profound and is the only source of grace effect. So this is not just essential. You can hear when I explain the grace aspect how big this is. Your fear of making a mistake is saying no to grace, keeping grace out. Grace only comes to those who make mistakes fearlessly, take risks unhesitatingly, and walk naked willingly. And as of today, you can't claim you weren't told. So every time you walk in the room, I'm immediately determining how naked are you? How willing are you to be mistaken or make a mistake? It's part of the seeing of the guru function. Just like God is concerned with it, I'm concerned with it. I have to be. I'm working for him. So if I correct you, it isn't because you've made a mistake. If I correct you, it's to make you more acceptable to God. There's only two corrections: to make you more acceptable to God, so that you're not operating in a nonsensical way on that dimension, or to enhance your spiritual possibilities so that you're not holding yourself back needlessly in big ways that are based on small things. Small actions, small attitudes, small behaviors, small statements that have big spiritual effect. So please don't take correction as an accusation that you're making a mistake. Correction is redemptive and supportive. It is not correcting a mistake, it's correcting your position of the moment so that you're in the best possible position. It literally has nothing to do with human logic. It's metaphysical and guru function only. So it'll make no sense to you. I may tell you to sit 1 inch to the left. I may tell you to hold your fork slightly different. I may tell you to take off your scarf. And you'll think, that's not logical. What's that got to do with anything? What's that got to do with going to God? What's that got to do with my spiritual life? That thought is your resistance. You need to leave these things to me. You're not going to figure them out because they're not mental. They have to do with the metaphysical operation of things that the guru function sees that you're never going to see. I'm not talking about advanced spirituality where you see things. You'll get to that. You're already seeing things you couldn't see a year ago, 5 years ago. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about guru function. Unless God appoints you a guru, you're not going to see these things because they're guru function seeings. They have to do with helping others. They have to do with being a servant to others. They don't have to do with human functioning. So there are guru abilities that are simply specific to the guru. Civilians don't need them. And if you had them, they'd be burdensome because they have a purpose, and the purpose is only guru service related. So understand it for what it is. Okay. Your turn. We have a online question and then your turn.
You have 2 online questions.
I know. I didn't make a mistake saying it that way. That's my way of saying it.
They can't hear me. It's just for you, or for them.
I said it the right way. Doesn't have to be corrected.
Okay. Who would you like to hear from first, Lila or not?
That's your choice. You're the DJ. Howard, we have next up.
Would you say to go ahead to Lila, please?
Go ahead, Layla, please.
You guys able to hear me? Okay.
There you go.
So, I that
She's pretty far from the microphone. I got mic through for this guy, so you can talk to her directly.
I'm not a good person at all.
Hey, Lila.
A nice, like, look, but inside,
Hey, Layla,
Bring him down. Carry her up.
can you get a little closer to the microphone and start over?
can you hear me now?
You're still far away from the mic. Get as close as you can to your microphone.
She's there.
Hello?
That's better.
Okay.
Bring down.
Go.
Bring down 3.
I've made some, like, bad mistakes at my work. I read certain situations wrong. And someone died yesterday. It's because I didn't handle it right. And that's why the topic that you're talking about today is very interesting to me, but I can't help but think that I did things wrong and that's why it happened. Even though I know it's not, I'm like an accomplice to murder. I understand that God was putting me there and everything else put me there, but I just think that there were things that I could have done that were better, and I didn't. So now I'm just realizing how much I suck, and that's all.
The only thing you could have done different is get out of healthcare.
I knew you were going to say this to me.
That's how smart you are. The only thing you could do different is get out of healthcare. If you're going to be in healthcare, you're going to see people die. You're going to see people get sick. You're going to see people get worse and suffer. And if you're going to allow yourself this indulgence of it's my fault, which you just implied you know it's not true, then you're just going to drive yourself crazy. So if you can't adopt a professional attitude, if you can't simply do your job and whatever to the best of your ability and whatever happens, happens, then really you should get out of healthcare. Because that's never going to change. The job of a healthcare practitioner is to do their job to the best of their ability and then accept whatever happens as they did their best and they didn't cause it. Even if they caused it, because sometimes you do your best and you did what any excellent clinician would do, and it is the wrong thing. It is lethal. Doctors do kill people, and that's part of the game.
But we can't call me an excellent clinician. We have to call me like a poor clinician.
I'm not calling you anything, but your self-judgments are not going to make you a better clinician. They're going to make you a worse clinician. If you blame yourself every time a patient gets worse or dies, you're going to become hesitant to do what you know, and you're going to be even less effective. But I'm not in the business of counseling people about how to have the right professional attitude. I've said it, and that's all I'm going to say about it. You know you're being foolish. You know it. You know that the only right attitude is you did your best, and the patient died anyway. And you know it's foolish to fall into an indulgent attitude of, oh, I think I might have contributed to killing them. You know the answer to this. You're bringing it to me because you don't want to actually accept what you know. So therefore, my answer, my response to you, my encouragement to you, my advice to you is accept what you know and stop being so self-indulgent. You can do way better. It doesn't become you, this self-indulgence. You're actually much better than that. So be professional. Okay? I'm not going to collude with the self-indulgence. I'm going to support the intelligence and accepting what you know to be the right approach. Sorry, I don't play poor me. I don't see any poor me in you. Chew on that, and now we'll hear from Brussels. They're all going. They're working. They're working on it. Hold on, folks. The technical crew is working on it. Bear with us. They're working on the technical difficulties. Meanwhile, who's got a deck of cards?
Ishan, would you like to ask your question until we work this out?
But will they be able to hear it? Oh, okay. So we'll go ahead with Ishan, then come back to the interweb once that technical problem is resolved. Get my stick ready.
So I guess I have a couple of questions and report.
Start with the report.
Okay. In terms of what I know.
And then the report if you listen to yourself, will be the answer to both questions. If you listen, you'll hear the answer. So we're economizing.
In terms of what I know there's awareness. This awareness is aware of itself. It's aware of thoughts, feelings, sensations. This awareness seems to has a relationship with will. It has a relationship with understanding. I guess there's certain truths that I know, like that there's no I, that awareness is key to seeing truth, and maybe a few others that I can't think of off the top of my head right now.
So do you see how those are these statements are the answers to those questions? Or do we need to go into it?
I don't see it.
Okay, whatever you like.
Okay. So my first question is willingness, is it the willingness or is it the lack of fear of making a mistake that's required? Because I feel like I'm willing to make a mistake, but I don't feel like I have a fearlessness about it. I know I don't have a fearlessness about it. I know that I still have that fear. I think that was actually pointed out to me when you said I'm not in the head patting business. You know, I realized I was afraid I might have made a mistake. Yeah, that's why I asked. Yeah. So is it willingness or is it fearlessness or is it both?
What do you think? What makes sense? What would be the logical answer to that question?
For me, what makes sense is the willingness, because fear
Correct. Next question.
On Wednesday, you talked about being a natural born, being a rebel. Like this is an act of rebellion, being a disciple. And so people who are rebels usually like to question authority. And it seems like when you say, I don't have time to explain like why I'm telling you to hold your fork a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
In a way that seems to imply don't ask the question, why?
Well, be smart about what questions you concern yourself with. Don't fall into self-indulgent questioning.
Okay, that makes sense.
Number one thing people say to me, which always shocks me, because I'm never trying to make sense. Truth could care less about making sense. But that is the number one thing. Every day I hear it from some pair of lips. That makes a lot of sense. You make sense. That makes sense to me. Yeah, that makes sense. And my inner answer is always the same. Who cares if it makes sense or not? If it's the truth, it's the truth. Or if it's helpful, it's helpful, whether it makes sense or not. But apparently I make tons of sense, which really is not my inner experience of me. I am addiction-free of the need to make sense. That's just mental tied downness. And I'm long ago no longer mentally tied down. So I have no need to make sense. So it's very odd to me that I'm always making sense according to other people. Oh well. It's just, I kind of don't take it as a compliment. I kind of take it as I'm a fool. People who make a lot of sense usually are fools because they're missing the big picture. They're missing the richness. But that's not the way people mean it when they say it to me. But nevertheless, that's how my personality takes it. I can take it almost as if it's an insult. Because I'm so not interested in making sense, and because I so utterly understand that making sense is a useless endeavor. You don't get to God by making sense, you don't find truth by making sense, and you don't experience reality by being concerned with making sense. All of those happen when you have no need and no concern for making sense. Because making sense is just a mental level value that people seem to have. And that's another luxury you can't afford. Obviously, some things need to make sense for you to understand them. But beyond that, making sense has no value. And the further you go into the transcendent reality, the less and less and less it has anything to do with making sense. And when you're really at the transcendent level, which is not far advanced, it's just fourth chakra. It's not high ground. Then you see that making sense is absolutely not part of that game, not part of moving higher. Making sense is the low-level stuff, the worldly level. Yeah. On the material side, when the focus is the material focus, then there's a value in that it makes sense. Beyond that, there's no value in it. It's the low road. And this is how most people live, isn't it? That it's important that everything makes sense. Well, there's no God in that. There's no truth in that. Truth is so far beyond the level of it mentally makes sense, because that's all it is. When you talk about make sense, you're saying I mentally comprehend it. Truth is so, or I think I mentally comprehend it. Truth is so much not involved with that in any way. That is so beneath the level of truth that for human beings to be overly concerned with it is simply a drag on your energy and a focus that you can't really get anywhere with. It works real good for increasing your bank account. It doesn't have anything to do with your spiritual life.
But understanding is important, it sounds like.
And understanding does not require making sense or that the understanding makes sense. It requires being clear.
So does understanding occur when it enters awareness or when it enters your being?
What does it matter when understanding occurs? All that matters is that you are more and more increasing your understanding about the things that matter. Is the technical addressed?
It is.
Okay.
One last question: is my project on what I know complete? No.
Practically haven't started.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
It's true. I'm building an airplane. I've got the propeller done. Am I done? No. Okay, DJ.
I'm audible.
We can hear him. We're now having speaker issues.
Test, 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 test. Okay, I'm there. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for the further explanation on the making mistakes thing. For the first time, I get it for real. When you started, I thought like, no, I don't think I'm doing that, but yeah, I think I'm not doing that. But then it dawned on me, like, yeah, sure. And what was very helpful is the consequences of it, to see those, and it's very clear.
Makes sense.
I almost said that, but no, it's just clear. It's clear.
I mean,
get it.
it shows you my personality flaws that I'm objecting to people saying to me it makes sense. That's a little skewed right there. That's not a guy with a full deck. Playing with a full deck. It's like he's objecting to being told he makes sense. Well, sorry,
it's
I'm a
also
human
linked-
being.
It's also linked to the talk you had on creativity, like spontaneity. If you're, you can be spontaneous when you're creative.
Yes, it prevents any real spontaneity. Absolutely prevents it. Then it's just a fake spontaneity. If it feels spontaneous, it's a limited spontaneity, and a limited spontaneity isn't spontaneity. Either that's the naked part. Either it's all hanging out, or it's some kind of hiding going on. There's no other way to say it.
Seems also not too difficult to drop.
No, it's not difficult at all. That's correct. If you understand how small an issue it is and how big its effects are, you see the necessity of letting it go. Big things that have small effects don't matter. Big things that have big effects do. Small things that have small effects don't matter. Small things that have big effects do. So simple. But doesn't that make sense?
Kind of.
Instead of, people are generally concerned with, is it big or is it small? Is it a small problem? Is it a big problem? Is it a small issue? Is it a big issue? That's the wrong way to conceptualize. That's the wrong way to analyze. The better way for your spiritual life, the better way is, does it have big effects or small effects? Whether it's big or small, what are the effects? Are the effects large? Then it's something to pay attention to. Are the effects tiny? Don't bother. Pick your battles. Prioritize wisely. People are often concerning themselves with things that have very small effects, yet their energy is all involved with fixing it, changing it, making it different. And when they succeed even, and you're not always going to succeed, but when it succeeds, the payoff is so minimal it wasn't worth the effort. It's a wrong equation in terms of the value. The effort wasn't worth what you get. The cost-benefit ratio is wrong. So pick your battles based on what's the effect, not what's the issue. What's the effect of that issue? These are practical tips that make so much sense. Okay, next. Go ahead, G.
I'm next. It's Donna.
Yeah, you're next.
So it's a report.
Lay it on me.
It's interesting that you started thinking about this, because this is kind of what let go a couple of days ago. Hearing a lot about what other people think. Giving that up so much. I'm spending a lot of time watching my mind and I'm seeing a really interesting kind of like process going on. When something happens, there's an immediate emotional or mind reaction, like I don't like it, or I'm judging it, or there's something wrong here. And then
That's right. That's how it works for every human being.
Yeah. So
You're speaking for
becoming
humanity.
aware. Yeah, I'm watching it happen more and more, and honestly, I notice that my mind isn't so much judging, but my heart is, or my emotions are. I shouldn't say heart. My emotions are judging, are getting affected by it.
Exactly. Your emotions are aroused, are involved.
Right. And yesterday, something happened, and that normal pattern happened, and I got nauseous. And at first I didn't like it, and then I thought, this is good. Because instead of indulging it, it made me sick. It made me feel this is indulging, and it's wrong. And it's not helping me at all.
Good.
So I want to pass it by you, make sure that's the correct response, but it feels right to me.
Well, that's why people indulge their emotions, because if they actually handled their emotions or used their emotions to guide them, they'd be more aware of the intensity of reality. And people are trying to avoid the intensity. So when you aren't trying to encapsulate or hold back the intensity, when you're not trying to keep the lid on, you may very well throw up. You may very well feel dizzy or faint. You may very well feel overwhelmed at the drop of a hat. But this management of one's emotional state is the non-naked position. So yeah, sounds right to me. So this is very basic, that we're all having immediate mind reactions and emotive reactions to whatever our experience in the moment is. And the point about it is we're always trying to manage it, whether it's being self-indulgent toward it or trying to make it look a certain way or trying to control it. And just a few other basic responses. These responses are all basic and everybody does all of them. So when that is no longer your base of operations, when you're not trying to control the experience of the moment, when you're not trying to manage it as if it was possible for you to manage it, then the intensity of the alive state becomes much more lived, much more unavoidable, much more apparent to you. And then you have to get sea legs for that. You have to adapt to that because it's not what you're used to. But once again, part of the spiritual requirement, you cannot be a spiritual forward mover without this taking place for you. Besides being willing to be a fool, being willing to be naked, you need to be willing to stop managing everything. And of course, being a fool and being naked are part of not managing. Not trying to manage what can't and shouldn't be managed. False notion that you're managing all these things. You are attempting to, so your experience is you're succeeding. But you're utterly failing at it because it can't be done. So your attempts are guaranteed failures. The best you can do is fool yourself that you're succeeding. And that's the basic experience of most people. That's why you're not in, it's a big chunk of why you're not in reality. Because you're busy managing what you can't manage. So that gives you a certain experience that's false. That colors everything in such a deep way that there's no way to be really involved with reality because your energy is all involved with managing on the imaginary level. That's why naked is required. That's why mistakes must be accepted. It's actually all related. These questions sound like they've got nothing to do with my speech, but obviously they have everything to do with my speech because everyone seems to be getting it, from what I can tell. And the implications are very far-ranging. So I think you're absolutely right, and you're really speaking for everybody. Everybody could say exactly what you're saying about what you're noticing, and everybody will sooner or later feel like throwing up if they stop that level of trying to manage. You don't even have to stop it entirely. You just have to ratchet back. And believe me, you'll get nauseous because it's like you're used to spinning. If you slow down, that's when you get sick. You don't get sick when you're spinning. It's when you reduce your speed by 50%. That's when your stomach suddenly hits the wall. Nice Gestapo haircut. I like it. Look at that. Show that. Show Tor's haircut. Hitler Youth. But the earring gives it away that it's not Hitler Youth. But have you seen a more 1936 German haircut than that? Don't go back to that haircutter. Any haircutter that makes you look like German youth, don't go back. Okay. Are we at our time limit, Mr. Technician?
We are.
Is this meeting until 11:30?
It is.
Okay. So the great news is the glass ceiling is broken. Someone has easily and for real stopped worrying about making mistakes. It's that simple. And now that that opening is there, that will absolutely tremendously benefit everyone else. So you can take the easy route. You don't have to break through a ceiling. It's been done for you. You should really, really appreciate the one who goes first, because they're the ones who get the cracked skull breaking through. So the hard work's been done for you, and you can simply slide through the opening. So take advantage of it, because the longer the opening is there and you don't go through, the harder it is for you. When the opening first appears, that's when it's the easiest to get through it. I don't know why that is. It's metaphysical law. It would seem logically that opening's opening and you can go through any time and it should be the same, but metaphysically it doesn't work like that. If you wait a long time, it becomes difficult. The real opportunity is when the prison doors are blown open recently. So take advantage. Get naked, be a fool, and regard it all as a mistake.